If you grew up in the early 2000s, you probably remember Madden differently than it is today. Endless nights building the perfect team in franchise mode, or maybe superstar mode was more your thing, creating the best player that the NFL has ever seen. A mode that felt like a true journey through the career of an NFL player. Before we had HD realism and microtransactions, we had chunky player models and overly dramatic hit-stick tackles in a simpler entry in the series. For me personally, Madden NFL 06 was the peak of that experience. The game that felt like the perfect representation of what the series should be. In this video, we're going back to revisit that era of Madden and see if Madden NFL 06 still feels as special as it did back in 2005. I'm Reisigo, and today we're tackling our way through Madden NFL 06, game number 79 of my challenge to beat every single GameCube game, and then review it. So how did Madden even become Madden? It all started with one man, Trip Hawkins. In the late 70s, Hawkins was really into Stratomatic, a football pen and paper tabletop game that he played all the time. I'm not going to fully go into what it is, but basically each player gets an athlete, which is represented by a player card. These cards have various ratings and result tables printed on them based on the player's dice rolls. Using dice rolls, each player can challenge each other and see what the outcome of each scenario would end up being. The only problem was that it required a bunch of math. With this in mind, Hawkins decided he wanted to input all of this information into a computer so that the player wouldn't have to calculate the points. Voila! One of the first simulation-based football games on PC. Hawkins knew that a take-home computer was several years away, so this idea was tucked away and he became the director of strategy and marketing for Apple until 1982 when he left the company to found Electronic Arts, or EA. Now classified as a video game company, Hawkins was able to take his idea from years ago and make it a reality. Hawkins later said that the real reason he even founded Electronic Arts was because he wanted to make computerized versions of games like Stratomatic. So he ended up following his dreams from years before. EA's first objective was to design such game. Hawkins knew he needed an endorsement from someone in the world of football, so he started with his favorite player, Joe Montana. Unfortunately, he was already locked into his contract with Atari Inc. Hawkins then went after his second choice, which was college football coach Joe Kapp. At the time, he was the coach for Cal University, but this sadly didn't work out either because he wanted upfront royalties that far exceeded what Hawkins was willing to pay. This went on for a couple of years until 1984, when he approached former NFL coach and then announcer John Madden. Hawkins and his game producer Joe Barra arranged a meeting with Madden on an Amtrak train trip over 2 days. This was because of John Madden's known fear of flying. This meeting was a massive success, not because he thought the game was going to be a massive success to the public, but because Madden envisioned the program as a way for teams to teach and test out plays without doing them on the field. During this trip, Madden even taught them plays and strategies so that they could have a better understanding of what the game of football was all about. Once they got Madden's endorsement, EA expected that Madden wouldn't have any more involvement in the game development. But they were wrong. The game of Madden was envisioned to be another 7 vs 7 football game. But John Madden said he wouldn't endorse it unless it was true to the game and had 11 vs 11. This quickly became a problem because of technical limitations and caused the game to get delayed for years. Because EA needed help, Hawkins decided to hire Bethesda's Softworks to help finish the game. But this only got them part of the way to the goal, because Bethesda sued EA for not publishing their game Gridiron. The legal battles further delayed the development of Madden, pushing it all the way back to 1988, where finally John Madden's football debuted for the Apple II computer. Early games focused on strategy, playbooks, and authentic simulation rather than the arcade action. But even the first game included a rating system for each player. There was only about 8 to 12 traits, nothing compared to the almost 200 that are in modern games now. But it was a way to figure out players' ratings and how man-to-man situations would perform. The game sold moderately well, but the interface was complex and confusing. They didn't have the NFL license, so they couldn't use real teams or players. And the game ran slowly because of having 11 players on each team. The team worked on improving the game until the shift to the 16-bit consoles and the rise of the PlayStation era. This era allowed Madden to explode in popularity. The The game had grown a lot since the first release and now included brand new key innovations. Those key innovations included season modes, franchise mode, improved animations and play calling systems, licensing deals with the NFLPA for real players. So by the late 90s, Madden was the premier football game on the market. The 2000s ushered in what most fans of the series consider the golden age for Madden, and where we're gonna land for this video. 2001 to 2006 specifically was able to ramp up what the Madden franchise could really achieve with new hardware and a way larger budget. And at the very tail end of the era was Madden NFL 06, the game we're playing today. Madden NFL 06 was developed and published by EA Sports, then released on August 9, 2005 for PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, Xbox, Xbox 360, PC, PSP, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, and even on mobile phones. I played the Nintendo GameCube one, so that's the one we're going to focus on for this video. Madden NFL 06 doesn't have a story aspect to it unless you're role-playing and imagining that you're the coach to your favorite team, or in NFL Superstar mode, you design the player to be you. Outside of that, there's not much of a story. I'd be happy to agree with either one of those options, but as for a written out story, there isn't one, and that's okay for a sports simulation game. The art style for Madden 06 still uses EA's long-running PS2, GameCube, Xbox visual framework, and art direction built around having players with slightly exaggerated proportions, saturated colors, a thick outline around the player's gear, and an almost cartoon look for the presentation of the game. This was a period before hyperrealism became the priority. Instead, the visuals focused on clarity and personality. With these types of visuals, the players really popped off the field and gave Madden a more stylized look over realism. The players in Madden NFL 06 aren't photorealistic, but have a design that's recognizable to anyone that's ever played the series. The players were still based on real athletes, but had a more simple look. Their muscles lacked definition and their faces had limited detail, but all the details were clean. The players' equipment were oversized so that you could read the names and numbers easily, even making the jerseys pop with a high contrast approach to shading. The results of this allowed the players to instantly identify the silhouettes for star players, even if their faces weren't perfect. When playing a game, the primary colors for teams were vivid, and the grass was always a bright green color for a maximum amount of contrast. Madden 06 feels brighter in comparison to new modern games in the series. The animations were an important part of setting Madden apart during this era. They felt more snappy, slightly exaggerated, but also felt responsive when the player hit the button on the controller. Each move that a player performed had signature movements attached to it so that you could easily recognize what was happening. The hit stick being one of the most noticeable because of how the player's body would snap and throw them forward. The menu's UI and presentation wasn't anything fancy, but had an almost ESPN look to most things. The interface used a lot of bold fonts, fancy animated transitions when moving from one menu to another, and this allowed for stats and player photos to stand out against the rest of the colors on the screen. The UI was busy, but it had a stylish look overall. Madden NFL 06 has one of the most iconic soundtracks in any sports game in my opinion. During this time, EA was still using EA Track, its own brand that was designed to hype up the player, feel modern to the current demographic, and respect what sports culture was during that time. The soundtrack for Madden 06 ended up being a mix of genres, including rock, rap, hip-hop, alternative, and pop-punk music. The overall vibe is very 2005 energy, adrenaline-heavy guitar riffs, confident hip-hop verses, and aggressive beats. Some notable artists that they were able to get for this title were Young Jeezy, Paul Wall, Fall Out Boy, Bullet for My Valentine, and The Bravery, among a bunch of other big-name artists during that time. EA Track helped define the identity of an entire generation of sports games, and Madden 06 sits right in the heart of that era. I know when I boot up Madden 06, I'm hit with a wave of nostalgia, thinking about all of my memories of franchise mode, player creation, and late nights playing this game with friends and family. Unlike modern Maddens that insert music in more places, Madden 06 keeps in-game audio focused on things like crowd reactions, commentary from Al Michael and John Madden, player chatter on the field, and the hits that the players take. So the soundtrack primarily lives in the menus, where players ended up spending a lot of time building teams, crafting franchises, and upgrading their superstar. This placement made the menu music iconic though. In a way, this made Madden 06 soundtrack into a time capsule, which I always find it fun to go back and see what was popular at the time. When people talk about old school Madden, this is what they mean. Madden 06 on GameCube still feels like the series at its peak. Tight controls, smooth animations, and the iconic hit stick that made defensive plays feel personal. There's something almost comforting about it. No over-the-top presentation or overloaded menus, just football, a simpler approach to the series. If you have never played a Madden game, or heck, even an American football game, let's quickly talk about the gameplay. Madden 06 played almost exactly like its predecessors. 11-on-11 simulation football, strong focus on play calling, reading defenses, and timing routes, familiar control scheme for passing, running, and defending. It was tightened up in some areas, but overall felt about the same as the previous titles. The objective was simple: score more points than the other team. You could kick the ball through the uprights for 3 points, or you can enter the end of the field and get 6 points. There are a few different ways to achieve that, like running the ball, throwing the ball, and by taking the ball from the other team and running it to the other side of the field. Each team has 4 downs to gain 10 yards, or they turn the ball over to the other team. If you don't want the other team to get the ball where you're currently at, you can choose to punt the ball, and wherever they get tackled is where they'll have to start their drive. This is the simple version of the sport, but a lot of these things require knowledge and strategies to really succeed. Some of the features in the games are called highlight stick and hit stick, which gave a more contextually sensitive feel to movement, allowing for running backs to juke, spin, or even run over defenders. The hit stick allowed for the player to feel powerful by dishing out hard hits to the offensive players, and also increasing their chance to cause turnovers in critical moments of the game. The hit stick was always one of my favorite features that they ever added into Madden. It wasn't new for Madden 06, but I think it made it a little easier to control. The player can play quick games against CPUs or other human players, or if you want to put more into the game, you can start a franchise mode and build up your favorite teams by trading, drafting, and upgrading players. You can also change coaches, playbooks, playstyles, and just about everything else that comes with owning a sports team. There were 2 features that were brand new to the series in this entry, one that people overwhelmingly loved, and one that split the fanbase in half. The first one of those is called quarterback vision. You can't talk about this game without mentioning the cone, the now infamous quarterback vision system that was added into the game. A feature that both seemed like something ahead of its time and a completely unpolished mess. With this new quarterback vision system, a quarterback with a higher rating would have a larger cone that appeared on the field. This made passing easier compared to a lower overall quarterback that had a tiny cone, which in turn made it more difficult to complete passes to wide receivers. Some people praised it for its so-called realism, almost forcing players into either having great quarterbacks on their team or actually playing the game to their quarterback's strengths. Others saw it as too complicated and caused players to make too many mistakes when playing. It was an experiment from EA that was still trying their best to make the games feel new and fresh with every installment. The one thing I really appreciated that EA did was give the player the ability to go into the settings and turn it off if they didn't want to use it while they were playing. Any new feature that isn't forced onto the player is never a bad thing in my opinion. They wanted to try something new, but also kept their fanbase firmly in the forefront of all their decisions. Something I feel EA lost sight of later on. But whether you loved or hated this feature, this cone became a talking point in the series lore. Then there's Superstar Mode, a feature that felt personal and added a lot of depth of becoming a real NFL player. Your career didn't just start on the field, it began with a personality test, an agent, and a sense of an identity. You weren't the team, you were one of the players trying to carve out your career. I don't think it was perfect, but it was extremely fun, and a very ambitious idea. I don't know if it's true, but it seems like a lot of later sports games got their idea for player career modes from Superstar Mode. They just ended up building off the foundation that was created in this game. Since this was their first attempt at something like this, it's not the deepest system in the world, but I remember loving going through different player careers when I was a kid. Sometimes I would be a running back or a wide receiver, and other times I would play defense as a corner or a linebacker. No matter how I played Superstar Mode, it was always a good time. But if Superstar Mode wasn't your thing, Franchise Mode was equally as deep. You would need to prepare weekly by scouting, managing your stadium, and coming up with game plans for the next opponent. Heck, you even had to handle team morale. It was simulation heavy, but in a way that felt meaningful. So what makes the GameCube version of Madden 06 important? It's not because it changed the franchise, but because it was the last game to preserve what it used to be. This was the year that the new generation of consoles received a stripped down version of the same game, and the GameCube got a version packed with old and new features. This means that this was the last time Madden would ever feel this way. What does Madden 06 on GameCube feel like today? It feels refreshing. It's less of just revisiting an old game and more like opening a time capsule. It's a reminder that football games should feel equally real as they do fun. I have such a hard time with new Madden games because everything just feels so bland to me. It's lost the video game part and doubled down on the realism part. Plus, it's all microtransaction and broken features. This game shows that career modes can feel personal, that innovation doesn't just mean money, and that a football game can be fun. But that could all just be nostalgia since I played so much of this as a kid. But I'd love to know what you think. What are some of your favorite Madden 06 moments? Tell me down in the comments. I look forward to reading every one of them. So would I recommend Madden NFL 06? I have mixed feelings about this one. It's not the most famous entry in the series, but it stands as a reminder of what Madden used to be and how fun the old games were. It lacks some of the new things that players enjoy like Ultimate Team and online play, but I think it makes up for it with character and its own sense of direction. I personally would rather play this over a new game in the series, but I could see how someone might think this game isn't great. So if you want to have a blast from the past or just want to see what Madden used to be like, then I would recommend this one. But if you really like the new titles, then maybe this isn't for you. You'll just have to make that decision yourself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe for more GameCube retrospectives, and let me know in the comments if you've ever played this, and what is your favorite NFL team. Until next time, dance in the end zone like nobody's watching.